Hello and welcome back to Hold My Drink, a sobriety podcast. My name is India Gantz. I'm your host, and today we're going to be talking about the pandemic and the effect that it had on alcohol usage. I think a lot of people started their problematic drinking during COVID, and it's kind of wild that we didn't just breeze past it. It was a long period of time, of course, and a lot happened and a lot of people were affected in a number of different ways. But now we're just back to living life. And this crazy thing happened that will be talked about in the history books for hundreds of years to come. I truly believe that. That pandemic was wild and the craziest human experience to go through. It felt like we were in some sort of dystopian society, on another planet. It was such a weird time. And so many people turned to alcohol during that time. And it freaking makes sense because that was a weird experience to go through. And so today we're going to talk about some numbers. I'm going to share some facts with you guys about alcohol usage and how the pandemic correlated with deaths due to alcohol. Because we talk a lot about deaths from COVID-19, but what is not talked about a lot is the rise in obesity, the rise in liver disease, and the rise in alcohol causing cancers caused by alcohol, and deaths caused by alcohol that the pandemic caused. There were more effects from the COVID-19 pandemic than just COVID-19. There was a big increase in alcohol, and it affected society in a negative way. And I think a lot of people developed problems during this time, myself being one of them. So let's get into today's episode. Welcome to Hold My Drink, a sobriety podcast. This is a no judgment zone. I really freaking like my life without alcohol. You're not alone. I hope you feel seen. Sobriety has changed my life completely. All right, so before I bring out the facts and we really get into the tea, I just want to talk about my personal experience during the pandemic, and I assume that many of you can probably relate to this. But, we're trapped inside. They tell us that this disease has taken over the world, basically, and you have to stay inside and you have to wear a mask outdoors when you're taking a walk. At least in Los Angeles, that was the case. All the restaurants were closed down. All the bars were closed down. I wasn't able to work at the time. I was working at a bar, so that closed down. I had no job. I had nothing to do every day. I made a lot of social media videos during that time, and TikTok was on the rise, so that was fun to play on TikTok. But that's about all there was to do. And like I said, even if you wanted to go outside and do something in nature, it's you had to wear a mask. I had a guy literally come up to me and cough in my face because I wasn't wearing a mask on a walk outdoors. That's Los Angeles for you. But anyway, so we're stuck inside with nothing to do. And alcohol makes boring things a lot more fun. I talk about this in a lot of my episodes. I talk about how in sobriety, I have learned what is actually fun and what was only fun because there was alcohol. And the pandemic, for example, there were probably some really boring times and confusing times and sad times and what are we supposed to do with our lives? And so you drink and it makes it all a lot more fun. During COVID was the first time that I drank in the morning. I remember the person I was with at the time introduced me to the hair of the dog to get over a hangover. And it was also kind of this mentality of why not? There's no rules. Society and all of its norms had been just broken down during COVID. Anything that you were used to or thought was normal was just not. Everything was turned upside down. And so what does it freaking matter if you have a drink at 9 a.m. versus 8 p.m.? It's all the same. It was such a weird time. We had no responsibilities. And for a while there, we thought that it was going to be 2 weeks of lockdown. I think they announced that in the beginning, 2 weeks of staying inside. This is a 2-week pandemic. Little do we know, it'd go on for 3 years. But at the time, we thought it was 2 weeks. So we thought, why not live it up? This is such a weird time. I'll just drink in the morning. I'll drink all day. It was pretty fun, if I'm being honest. I even did a partnership with an alcohol brand back then, or it was an alcohol, distributor type of thing. It wasn't Bevmo or Total Wine & More, but it was kind of something like that, but online. And I did an ad for them, and it was literally about how there's nothing else to do in the lockdown than drink. And it was kind of a compilation of me like reading a book upside down and drinking a Coors Light. And then it was me in bed, like watching TV, having a glass of wine. And then it was a clip of me opening the fridge and grabbing a beer and like shaking a cocktail shaker. And it was just at each different time of the day, I was drinking these various drinks, and it was to promote the different alcohol that this company sells. Kind of crazy that I did an alcohol partnership back then, and I was really into alcohol. I did several alcohol partnerships because I thought, what's my passion in life? Booze. So I reached out to all these alcohol brands and alcohol companies, and I would work with them and make money. But anyway, so yeah, I made a video literally about how I'm just drinking so much in the pandemic. And it was like a lighthearted, funny, cute, relatable video. It actually did really well on TikTok, and everyone was like, oh my God, that's so funny. Me too, me too. And it was all funny and lighthearted until it wasn't. And yeah, my problem with alcohol started during the pandemic. It's when I was introduced to the fact that you could drink in the morning, you could drink all day, you could drink during stressful situations, you could drink during sad situations. It just introduced me to the problem that I would have. And that lighthearted, funny video about drinking all day kind of became my actual reality. And it turned from being a funny, lighthearted situation that we're all going through, ha ha ha, oh my God, we're all drinking so much, this is so funny, to like, whoa, we have a new type of pandemic on our hands, the alcohol pandemic. And it got to a pretty extreme point for a lot of people. And let's go right into the facts. I pulled up a few different articles to reference here talking about the impact on alcohol deaths and like our health as far as alcohol goes during the pandemic. All right, so from keckmedicine.org, it says from pre-pandemic 2018 to the height of the pandemic 2020, heavy alcohol use among Americans rose by 20%. And in 2022, the increases were sustained. And this is what I'm talking about with the pandemic introducing us to the problems. Like, the pandemic showed us this is how you can drink in an unhealthy way. Like, let's do it. It's fun. But then when you keep doing it after the pandemic had ended, that's when you realize, okay, I actually developed a long-lasting problem here that needs to be addressed. So kind of wild. Huge increase from pre-pandemic to during the pandemic of 20% heavy alcohol use. It says the rise in drinking was seen across all age groups, genders, race, ethnicities, and regions in the country, except for Native Americans and Asian Americans. Adults ages 40 to 49 had the highest increase in heavy alcohol use. Okay, interesting. Okay, and this is where it kind of gets a little bit sad. I'm going to talk about the death toll from alcohol use. It says alcohol-related deaths during the COVID-19 pandemic. So we have the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, 2019, there were about 79,000 alcohol-related deaths. 79,000. Then we go to 2020, and there are 99,000 alcohol-related deaths. That is the 20% increase when it used to be a pretty consistent 2% increase per year. 2% is normal, and it was 20% during the pandemic. Do you think that's a sign? Like, the alcohol pandemic that happened during the COVID-19 pandemic. It's crazy. So 79,000 in 2019, 99,000 in 2020. And then we have 109,000 alcohol-related deaths in 2021. So yet another increase. That is a lot of alcohol-related deaths. And it's kind of crazy because I guess a while back before my sobriety, I didn't exactly know what an alcohol-related death was. I mean, I thought you had to be like a really crazy heavy drinker to die of an alcohol-related death. And that's just not the truth because there's so many different diseases that alcohol can cause, like diabetes and pancreatitis and issues with the gallbladder and liver disease and cancers of the mouth and the liver and the pancreas and various things. Not to mention the deaths that occur because you're drinking, like the drunk driving incidents or violence or, all sorts of different things. And I know that the domestic violence numbers increased during the pandemic too, because everyone's at home, and then you add alcohol to that and you just got a big whole mess. So yeah, increased alcohol usage in America during the pandemic was massive, and it was a problem. And it's kind of crazy to look back and think that we lived that, like that actually happened. It seems like a whole different world, ages away, but it's 2025. That was like 5 years ago, 4 years ago since it ended. Not even that long ago, and it feels like a different freaking world. Like, how was that normal? How did that actually happen to us? And I'm going to stop on the stats for a second just to say that we are, not in a cheesy way or anything, but we are actually so freaking strong to have made it through the pandemic, because that was so weird. Nothing about that was normal. Like, shouldn't have happened, you know? We didn't have any previous experience with something like that, and so I don't think people knew how to handle it. I'm talking like government officials, and then also us, just civilians going through it. I don't think anybody knew what was going on or the best way to handle it. Everything is 2020 in hindsight, and I think things could have been handled differently. But when you're going through that and experiencing that, it was foreign to all of us. And so I always say we got to give ourselves some grace. Like, we were dealing with that as best we could. I mean, okay, maybe not as best we could. Like, over drinking is never the answer, people, okay? But we did it. I did it, that's for sure. Not to mention, I got into a relationship with this guy who was not great. He was really awful to me in a lot of ways. I talk about this situation in several of my episodes. But yeah, it turned out to be a really awful situation. And I dated this guy right at the beginning of the pandemic. We started dating. Or just before, like a month before the pandemic. And then we go into this lockdown. And I didn't think he was ever going to be my forever person. I kind of knew he wasn't the one. But again, it was the pandemic. There was nothing else to do. Why not? So I keep dating this guy. And that's kind of why our relationship lasted a lot longer than it should have, because I just kept saying, like, why not? I'm bored. I'm literally bored and he's someone fun to hang out with at home. Like, we played games all the time. We drank so much together. The two of us together kind of accelerated that heavy drinking. I'm not sure I ever would have gotten into drinking to the extent that I did if it weren't for my relationship with him. So we have a bad person and bad relationship mixed with a pandemic, mixed with alcohol. Wow. Not great, not healthy. And my experience is not unique. So many people have told me on TikTok and in my DMs that COVID is when they started their heavy drinking and where their alcohol usage got kind of out of control and they developed a problem. It was wild. I remember just like talking with people about how their garbage bins were just filled with so many cans and bottles, and we would hear the neighbors like dumping theirs into the trash, and you can just hear so much clinking around and stuff. It's sad to look back. All of us were dealing with that, and all of us were like, why not? Why not start drinking at 1 p.m.? Why not start drinking at 11 a.m.? How about 9? There's nothing else to do. And so that's how we filled our time. All right, so another fun fact, not so fun fact. It says in 2020, sales of alcohol increased by 2.9%, so almost 3%, which is the largest annual increase in over 50 years. Holy crap, holy. That's wild. This is kind of obvious, but according to the research, it says research suggests that some people increased their alcohol consumption in an effort to cope with the pandemic-related stress and anxiety. This was particularly common for people with pre-existing struggles with anxiety, depression, and alcohol misuse. All right, so I'm not making this episode political at all, and I kind of hate that the pandemic is a political thing. Like, I wish that we were just all in it together and it didn't have to take a political spin. So try not to hear this information through a political lens. I'm just sharing some thoughts because, like I said, what a weird time. And we all have had thoughts similar to this. It was just confusing. I felt like we were being lied to. I felt like we were being controlled. We had all sorts of crazy, wild thoughts. So this is just a random thought of mine. But this says that the death toll from COVID-related deaths in 2020 was 1,800,000, which is a ton. And I have to wonder, I always like to look at things critically and kind of second guess things before just instantly believing them. And while I hear that, wow, that's a large number, we know that if you get COVID and you already have existing conditions, that you'll be more likely to pass from COVID. So whether that's the obesity, the compromised liver, pancreatitis, sicknesses, colds, if you have a weak immune system, if you're a cancer patient, whatever, and you also get COVID, you're going to be more likely to pass from it. So I look at that 1.8 million number, and I wonder how many of those deaths labeled as COVID deaths were also alcohol-related deaths because they had liver disease undiagnosed, or, pancreatitis, gallbladder, whatever, cancers, all these different things that can come from overuse of alcohol. I wonder how many of those deaths labeled as COVID deaths were also alcohol deaths, or other things in life, other illnesses, other conditions in addition to COVID. Because we know that the alcohol-related deaths were so high. I just wonder if there were any crossovers and if those stats of the alcohol-related deaths also made it into the COVID-related deaths, because it was almost like their body was struggling. They were dealing with alcohol-related conditions, and then they get COVID on top of that, and that's what did it for them. That's just my thought. So a lot of the deaths were kind of, not in a morbid way, but like advertised as COVID deaths. And I just wonder if alcohol was a bigger part than we give it credit. Because I still feel like America in general doesn't want to look at alcohol as a problem substance. I think that America wants to look at cigarettes as a problematic substance. It's talked about all the time, and it's like a law that you have to state it on the package that it can cause lung cancer and all this stuff. Alcohol doesn't have that, and it's such a large industry. I mean, you watch the Super Bowl commercials, for example, there are so many alcohol ads. People are drinking in the ads. Alcohol is such a big part of our life and our community and our economy, big time. And so I don't think people want to believe that it can really harm a society. And in COVID, I would like us to realize that it harmed our society. People, in my previous episode about alcoholism and using the word alcoholic, it states that somebody's an alcoholic if they depend on alcohol and if they drink to cover emotions or deal with stress, anxiety, and sadness. That's what it kind of labels alcoholism as. And I think that during the pandemic, a lot of us drank to cover up those feelings of stress, anxiety, sadness, whatever. It was such a confusing time, and it makes sense why we turned to alcohol. But if that's kind of the definition of problematic drinking, then I think a lot of people were drinking in a problematic way during the pandemic. And it makes me a little bit angry because, people who didn't struggle with alcohol and had a healthy relationship with alcohol developed a problem that's now completely changed their lives. And at least for me, and probably most of the people listening, we've made it out. We won. We got sober, and we overcame any problems that we had with alcohol. But some people haven't, and they still have problems that remain if they're still alive on this earth. They're dealing with those problems, and people see, parents of their friends or, people in their community, people at their church, I don't know, in life, struggling with alcohol. And we see that. We see it in our communities. And yeah, lucky for us, we made it out. But some people are still dealing with that. In the pandemic, if you want to blame someone else, it's the freaking pandemic's fault that so many people developed alcohol problems. It's wild. And it brings me back to another episode that I did recently, the episode about how Gen Z drinks significantly less than the prior 3 generations. And one of the biggest reasons that baby boomers drank was because of World War II and dealing with the stress and anxiety around that. And here we are in modern times, 2020, drinking because of also a similar worldwide experience. World War II and the COVID-19 pandemic are obviously different. But going through this kind of universal experience of a lockdown and a pandemic and our lives changing and things closing and businesses plummeting. And, it was such a crazy time. And we were all going through that. And we all, or not all, but a lot of us turned to alcohol, clearly by the stats. So it's consistent with previous generations. When worldwide crazy things happen, humans turn to alcohol to get help. And I think that's why in sobriety we learn, or it's so awesome that we learn so many amazing coping strategies. I talk about alcohol and ADHD and learning strategies to function in life better with ADHD. I talk about how to address feelings of sadness, feelings of anger in sobriety. Listen to my numbing with alcohol episode if you're interested in this topic. But when you kick out the substance that is so easy to turn to in those sad situations, you actually learn and develop skills to deal with what you're feeling in a much healthier way. Alcohol is a Band-Aid. You're going to have to address those issues later. Whereas coping strategies and dealing with them in sobriety and finding tools to address the problems, those are actual solutions. You are getting to the root of the problem. You're figuring out why you feel that way and how best to get yourself or pull yourself out of that situation. Sobriety is a much healthier way to learn about coping skills. Alcohol is the unhealthy way to deal with stuff, and a lot of people turn to alcohol in times of need. Clearly, that's what we did during the pandemic, during World War II. It's kind of the trend. So let's not be part of the next statistic, and let's stay healthy, stay sober, take care of ourselves, look out for ourselves, and work on dealing with life's ups and downs in a much healthier way. Like I said before, give yourself some grace. COVID was a wild time, and if you are listening to this and you are sober, congratulations. We did it. We pulled ourselves out, and I'm so freaking proud of you. I've said frickin' a lot this episode, but at least I don't swear. I'm not a swearer, fun fact. But I probably overused the word frickin'. So anyway, on that note, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you for the next episode. Bye.